So welcome to our Talk About It workshop with Marina Braff. I'm so happy that you're here with us today. I am Tessa Garner, Parent Engagement Coordinator at Beach Cities Health District. And this is the 6th session of our virtual Talk About It series. And we're just so glad that we're able to continue to connect with the community and engage some of our local providers like Marina. So Marina, I'm going to turn it over to you. I am very excited to hear your presentation.
Thanks, Tessa, and hi, Lori, and thank you so much for joining us today. Just to give you a little bit of background, I am going to share my screen because that's actually one of my slides. I am a private practice therapist and have an office in Hermosa Beach where I primarily work with teenage girls and guys dealing with anxiety, depression, some eating disorders, and within the last couple of months since COVID has kind of come onto the scene, a lot of our sessions are, one, done virtually, but two, are really focused on dealing with the anxiety and the uncertainty around what's happening. And I think for the seniors especially, they're dealing with a lot of like grief and frustration and kind of confusion about what this time in their life really is going to look like and how to deal with it. So it's my intention that during this presentation, I'll be giving you guys tools and suggestions. And because we're such a small group, feel free to unmute yourself or write in the chat if you have any questions. But I will leave time at the end of the session to also give you some time to follow up with that as well. And then the information that I'm going to be going over during the presentation is on a flyer. And so I'll make sure that Tessa sends that out to everyone who has registered, and you can print it out, share it with your kids or anyone that you think might need it. So welcome. So I wanted to start by really just acknowledging the loss of what's happening. And, it's no one's fault that this is what's going on. It's no one's fault that, our teens aren't having these milestones that they were really expecting and looking forward to. But we still do want to acknowledge what it is and what is going on and what it is that they are missing out on. And so I'm sure we all can imagine what senior year in high school was like for us. And senior year itself was something that we were all so excited about and looking forward to. And the prom and the grad night and even like the senior ditch day, there were so many moments that we were looking forward to. And it was something that we had really been working towards for 12 years. And I think as we get closer and as we start stepping into high school and as freshmen, we're seeing the seniors kind of go through these same milestones. And it was always like this dangling the carrot of like, okay, like they're there, like I just got to get there. And now, being in the situation where they're at, they weren't able to do that because the last 3 months have been distance learning and a distance graduation or drive-through parade or whatever it is. And so I think one of the things that really would be helpful for you all to do as parents and as educators is to just acknowledge the loss, to acknowledge the fact that they don't get those situations, those milestones. And I know there's some schools who are talking about potentially doing like a prom a couple months down the line when it's safe to do so or whatever. But just the fact that they're not able, they weren't able to spend the second half of their senior year on campus, and being on campus during your senior year in high school, like that's part of the fun too, because you're the big man on campus. So you really want to do check in with your kids to see how they're feeling and to really kind of try and understand like how much of a bummer this is, and really kind of give space for all of that. I'm going to be talking more about how to do that and how to open up the dialogue, but I just want to set the framework that we really do want to have this conversation and give them the opportunity to kind of vent all of their emotions, because it really isn't fair. It really wasn't what they were working towards and looking forward to. And, you want them to be able to express that. So validate the grief, the frustration, the disappointment. So the next thing is to recognize the uncertainty. So May 1st, I think, was the official day where students had to commit to the universities that they were going to attend. And imagine making, I can't even imagine this. Imagine making a decision about where you're going to commit, not knowing if at the beginning of your freshman year, you were even going to be on that campus. Like, that kind of makes my stomach hurt. So I think that you really have to recognize how much uncertainty they had to sit with not only May 1st, but some students still probably won't know what's happening with their school. I think June 22nd is the date that I seem to be hearing consistently in terms of what the beginning of freshman year is going to look like. If it's going to be on campus primarily, if it's going to be a hybrid model, if they're just going to be online. And given all of those different potentials, there's potentials for having to pivot college plans. A lot of parents aren't wanting to pay for their kids to go to a university across the country if they're not even going to be in a university classroom. So I think a lot of students are worried about that, and again, frustrated and angry, and like, I was about to be a freshman and like step onto this whole new university life, and now that could potentially not be something to look forward to as well. So I think, asking the questions and making sure that, it's okay to acknowledge if you don't know the answer. I think that's kind of something that's very humbling about this whole dynamic, is that no one really knows answers to a lot of these questions, and we're all trying to figure it out as we go. And if you can be genuine and authentic with your kids about that, and if you don't know an answer to their question, acknowledge that, state that, but then do what you can to help guide them to someone who might know the answer. And if no one knows the answer, if it's one of those things where June 22nd or later we'll find out what's happening with school, then that is the answer, and that's the best that you can do. But I think no one likes not knowing. Everyone likes having an understanding and kind of a feel for what's coming up, because the summer before your freshman year in college is supposed to be one where you're anticipating so much excitement and, getting stuff for your dorm rooms and figuring out who your roommate is going to be. And again, all these other milestones. And when we don't really know what that environment and that landscape is going to look like, there continues to be uncertainty. And with uncertainty comes anxiety. So again, I just encourage you to, create the space for your kids to talk about it. So that that way, you can help them and guide them to the resources, or at least show them how to find someone. And how to find someone and how to use these resources is another thing that we're going to be talking about in a little bit. So make space for the feelings. So I grabbed a quote from one of my seniors in high school, and she said that, "I just wish my parents would ask me what this year has been like." And that was in the general context of feeling really frustrated that her parents were really getting on her for falling behind in her schoolwork once we all switched to distance learning. And, her parents had always been, do really well in school and get all of your assignments turned in. And it was really challenging for her because a lot of the schools aren't doing a penalty for your grades dropping or for assignments not being turned in. And so finding the motivation and the momentum to do that was a challenge. And not only that, she wasn't seeing her friends. She wasn't leaving the house. She was staying with her parents, which, let's be real, like teens and parents, they don't always see eye to eye on a lot of things. So there was a lot of tension and a lot of stress happening within the home. And one of the things that she really wished that they would have done throughout these last couple of months was just to check in with her and ask her what this year has been like. Because I think that if she would have been able to communicate that to them, they could have maybe understood a little bit more about how hard it was to be in distance learning, how hard it was to learn math over Zoom, and things that I know I would not do well in. And so now, yes, like the school year's over and graduation has mostly happened and finished, but I think like you can still open up the conversation and ask what the last 3-4 months have been like, and what are some things that you want to do differently or do more of during the next couple months before college starts, in whatever capacity that looks like. But even still, we have to grieve what our new normal looks like, and we have to grieve the losses that we missed out on in the last couple months. And again, prom and grad night and all of these things that, for many of our students, that was like the big moment. Like that was their time to shine, and that was their time to take pictures with their friends and do all these things. And so really making space for them to grieve in whatever way that looks like for them. And then to also work with them to figure out like, okay, so we can't do prom like we used to, but can you still get dressed up, and can you still take pictures while being safe? Like, can you try to pivot a little bit and make some adjustments, but still honor the traditions and the customs that they really wanted to do this year? The other thing is to listen and honor the feelings. And I know I'm repeating myself, but I just think that this is so important for parents to do, because a lot of times we want to fix and we want to take away their pain. And we want to say, oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, you really want to go to Disneyland? Okay, Disneyland's opening July 18th. Like, we'll take you there, and we'll go at night, and we'll try and make it feel like grad night. It's like, that's really sweet that you're willing to do that. And a lot of times, like, they just want to vent, and they just want to kind of like say like, but yeah, okay, but it still sucks. And yeah, okay, great. Can't wait to go to Disneyland when it opens, but it's not going to be the same. And I'm not going to be there at 1 a.m. and with all of my friends. And so as much as we want to fix, and as much as we want to take away the pain and the disappointment and everything, just let it be for a little bit. And I say that with the caveat that if the feelings become overwhelming, that if the feelings become too much for even you as a parent to really know how to manage, then to seek support is needed. Get them connected to a therapist, figure out if there's a college counselor that, maybe that would help like with their anxiety, figure out who it is that they need to be talking to, because you as the parent can only do so much. You as the parent are only expected to know so much. So, make space for the feelings and seek additional support as needed. So the next thing that I want to talk about is how to embrace novelty. And this one I get really excited about, because the last couple slides have kind of been a bummer and talking about how much this sucks and how much disappointment there is and can be. But this slide is important because it's about embracing novelty. It's the power of the reframe. And what I mean by that is, as opposed to saying like, this is happening to me, COVID's happening to me, quarantine is happening to me, it's saying, I get to use this time to do blank. And so I think a lot of our teens, like before COVID, were wanting to be able to cook more, or be able to be outside more, or spend time with their friends more, or do something more that they didn't have the time and the capacity to do because they were booked with school and extracurriculars and sports. And so now, we're still at safer at home, and I know things are going to lift this Friday, but they're still going to have more time. And, it's really getting them to think about like, okay, well, what do you want this time to be about? What do you want this time to kind of mean for you? And how do you want to reflect back on this time and think like, oh yeah, like, I made it through distance learning. I graduated in this crazy uncertain time. And then after I graduated, I used the summer to do blank. And so I have a picture of a laundry machine, because I know there's a lot of kids who still don't know how to do their laundry. And, talking about going off to college, you want to prepare them to launch and to launch into adulthood. And so now's the time to teach them how to do that, to teach them how to cook their own meals, to teach them about nutrition and budgeting and all of these things that, I would know that I wish my high school would have taught. But we didn't have time in the curriculum or space in the curriculum. And now you as parents and as educators, like, we have a little bit more of a window. We have a little bit more breathing room to really talk to our kids about these life skills and these things that they're going to need regardless. So if we have the opportunity to do it, you want to jump on it, and really to be thinking about this as a novel time, as something that they're hopefully not going to experience again. And when we think about it in those terms, there can be a level of excitement and there can be positive energy going towards it, as opposed to like, oh my God, this is awful. Because when we get into that position, it's really easy to go down the rabbit hole and to feel sorry for ourselves and to wish things were different and all of that. So really be thinking about how you can use this time as a way to flip the script and to think about like, what is it that your kid needs to know before they go off to college, in whatever capacity that is, that you can use this time to teach them. A lot of my students are saying or a lot of my clients are saying that they now also want to use this time to get a job and to figure out what that's like, and to start saving money before they go off to college. And any of that is great, and it's a great use of time, and it's great life skills. So embrace novelty. That's a big one. The other thing is that this is not forever. And I say this for you to tell your kids as much as I say this for you to tell yourself. These last 3 months have felt like forever. It's felt like kind of like 3 years. But it's not going to go on forever. This is temporary. There will be a vaccine. Things will change. We will start to have more of a feeling of normal again, you know? And you have to remind your kids of that, because for teenagers, their frontal lobe is not fully developed, and their frontal lobe is all about logic and consequences and long-term thinking. So what's great about teens is that they really can be in the moment, but in this regards, like, we've got to get them thinking long term, because if they don't, again, they're going to get stuck in this sucks, and this sucks period, done forever. It's hard for them to think forward that, you know, things are going to change. So you really want to instill hope and excitement by thinking of what's to come. And you really want them to think like, okay, you know, you're going to go to college, you're going to be in whatever university, and you're going to be doing things differently, and you're going to be in a different setting, and really get them excited about that, and think about the novelty that college life will bring, and think about the milestones that they have to look forward to then. Like, this isn't over now. And really how they're going to make up for lost time. You know, I think that so much of our mentality through this and moving through this goes to remembering and reminding ourselves that, yeah, we haven't been able to be in school and be with our friends as much, but that doesn't mean that we'll never be able to do that. And how do you want to make up for lost time? How do you want to, you know, celebrate the moment where you get to be out and eating at your favorite restaurants, or going shopping again, or doing these small things that, you know, we haven't been able to do, but now we're starting to be able to do them? How do you want to celebrate that? And how do you want to make the most of it? And then the last thing is, you know, they're a part of history right now. Everything that's happening right now will, without a doubt, be in history books, and will, without a doubt, be talked about when they have kids and grandkids and all of that. And it's kind of a cool way to frame their timing again, because you get to pose the question of, when you're telling your kids or when you're telling your grandkids that, you know, like, you were alive during this time, you were in high school and getting ready for college, how do you want to be able to tell these stories? What do you want to be able to say? And I think that that can be a really empowering conversation starter, because it gives them some control. It gives them some power in what they do and how they show up. And I think one of the big reasons that we're all struggling with COVID-19 is that we are feeling like we don't have control over anything. And it's really trying to remind your students and your kids to find those little moments that they can control, and that they can get excited about, and that they can look forward to, whether that timeline is, you know, tomorrow, or whether that's a couple months from now. So I really want to, you know, highlight that, and again, use that as a way to, you know, to remind you all of the importance of mindset. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is self-care. And I think that, again, this is as much of a, you know, student specific example as it is for everyone who's listening. And self-care is so important right now because of everything that's going on, not only just with COVID, but with the protesting too, is that we're being bombarded with information and being bombarded with things that we're trying to process and we're trying to handle. And I think that, you know, we really want to teach our kids, again, kind of going back to the previous slide about life skills, we want to teach our kids about what we can do about how to take care of ourselves and how to take care of our emotions. And when you're asking your kids, you know, how are you feeling, and checking in with them, a lot of that is also modeling for them how to regulate the emotions. And so to get your kids to start thinking about, okay, so if you're feeling really stressed out, if you're feeling really anxious, what are you going to do? What can you do? What tools do you have, in your toolbox? And some of that is simple. It's, FaceTiming a friend or going for a walk outside on the green belt or doing little things like that. But really remembering and reminding them too that self-care is one of the things that we can control, and it's one of the best ways to shift our mindset and to keep moving forward. So I think that is my last slide. I wanted to leave some space for questions and comments. So I will stop sharing my screen for now.
Well, Marina, I took a bunch of notes because I
Okay.
think you just did such a good job distilling it into some really digestible chunks. And I think that as I was listening to you, I was thinking that not only does this apply to high school seniors, but I think it could also apply to fifth graders that might be
Mm,
missing that fifth
mm,
grade promotion, eighth
mm,
graders, things like that. So do you want to talk a little bit about, I know that you mentioned, the frontal lobe
mm,
development of
mm,
teenagers, but
mm,
maybe talking a little bit more about the younger set of
mm.
kids and how maybe they're processing it that way?
Yeah, definitely. I think that for younger kids, this is even more confusing because they don't have the knowledge, because they're not seeing their peers really like process it in the way that teens are. Now, granted, that's can be kind of limited, but I think that for kids, like it's kind of like, okay, you're in school one day and then now you're not. And so for the younger ones, it's really up to the parents on how the best ways to really explain this whole situation. And it's on the parents to frame it in a way that's going to keep their anxiety at a minimum. And how many books have been written about parenting and how their anxiety or their depression can kind of trickle down to their kids. And I think even more so when it comes to situations like this. And if parents are feeling frazzled and not knowing what's going to happen, and they're kind of like rushing about the day and not really sure of what they're going to do or how they're going to homeschool or whatever, their kids are going to see that and they're going to kind of take the idea that this is stressful and that, okay, I need to be really stressed out about that, and mom and dad are stressed, so I need to be stressed. And that's going to really prevent their functioning in school, because they're doing distance learning too. And if they're operating on a stressed mindset and like a fight or flight, then they're not able to focus because they're kind of like directing their attention to mom and dad and making sure mom and dad are okay. And so again, I think for the younger kids, whether it's elementary or middle school, it's really important for their parents to be modeling appropriate emotional regulation.
I think that is definitely true. And one of the other things I was thinking about is, the question where the student said, I wish my parents would ask me how this school year was going for me. I think it kind of goes back to starting the conversations and holding the space. But do you have any recommendations of how to facilitate a conversation, maybe about how they're feeling about the transition from elementary to middle to high school to college,
Mm-hmm.
and the general anxiety I think kids experience when they're doing a big change. Like I know when I went to middle school, I was so scared about changing for PE that I almost I almost refused to go to school. And so
Right.
I think it can be tough, especially when you have kids that don't want to talk about it. All they're going to say, I'm fine, it's fine, I'd like to go on my iPad now,
Mm-hmm.
it's good, I'm great. And so do you
Right.
have any advice for maybe those type of situations?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that for those situations, like the best way to handle it, well, there's two ways. I think one is that regardless of where your kid's at, if they're open or if they're not, as a parent, you want to be really authentic in your communication. And for those kinds of situations, like it can be something as simple as like what you just said, like telling a kid like, hey, I know you're getting ready to go to middle school, and I know when I was about to go to middle school, I was really nervous about changing in PE, and it like gave me a stomach ache and I dreaded PE days. Like how are you feeling? Because what that's doing is that's already showing that you're disclosing information for your kid and that it wasn't easy for you and that it was scary for you. So then they might feel a little bit more comfortable kind of sharing as well. The other way to kind of like ninja move it is to use examples from TV shows or from movies, or even like articles they're seeing in the paper, to basically say like, hey, this happened in whatever show, and Sally was really upset about how her first day of school went. I'm wondering like, what would you think if that happened to you at school, or what would you think if that happened to your friend? And the reason that that can be really helpful is because it takes the focus off of the kid, because as much as we think like our kids want to be the center of the universe, a lot of times it's really scary for them. So I think that by kind of going around and just asking them like, how would you handle that? Or what would that be like for you? You're still getting information and insight into how they're thinking about it and their problem solving skills and all of that. But, you're not having to put them on the hot seat.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. And I also just wanted to highlight your point about reframing. I think that's so important because, out in the community, I've heard a lot of students are angry. I think a lot of the confusion can turn into different emotions when you process grief, and so I think that the reframing the situation, focusing on what you can control is such a great thing to encourage kids to, not only in this time but in life, right? I think it's definitely a skill that can be carried on beyond beyond now, which I think
yeah. And I think with anger too, I saw, like, I think it was, I forget what school she was giving a speech for, but Michelle Obama talked a lot about how anger can be really useful, but it can also be really detrimental depending on how you channel it and what you do with it. And so I think a lot of the kids are feeling angry right now. And it's like, I get it. I understand. Like, what are you going to do about it? And so again, it kind of puts the ball in their court and it empowers them. Like, okay, you don't just have to just sit here and take it. What are you going to do? So I know when this first came out with COVID and there was a lot of talk about, graduation changes and all of that, a lot of my senior clients were like, well, I'm angry, so I'm going to create a planning committee. And, I'm going to make sure that, certain things are still included and we don't lose sight of certain like milestones, like for graduation. And I think, moving forward, it's like, okay, are you nervous about college? Like, what can you do? Like, how can you use that anger to channel it? And then also kind of explaining to them, like, are you really angry? Like, asking them, are you really angry? Because a lot of the times, like, anger is just like the tip of the iceberg. And really what's beneath all the iceberg is sadness and loss and everything else that I talked about earlier. And so it's kind of checking in with them, because it could be that you check in with them and kind of explain that. And then they say like, oh, yeah, I actually am really sad. And then from there, you can have a much more powerful and real conversation.
Definitely. And so I think that it's great that we have your slides to share and the resource page that you mentioned. And I know that your contact information is on there, which is great. I think that, some people are really interested in reading about it. They don't necessarily want to talk about it yet, but they want to read about it. So just at the top of your head, if not, you can always send it later. Is there any sort of resources that you can think of that maybe people, if they just want to do research first and then have the conversation?
So as it pertains to supporting seniors, I don't have that. I do have a blog about managing anxiety during uncertainty, which a lot of this is kind of parallel to it. These slides are just more specific. I can send you the link to that blog, but that blog goes more in depth into, scheduling and self-care and managing, or how to manage the anxiety and all of that. And I think there's another infographic that goes with that. So they can definitely look at that and cross-reference it, and that should be a nice little package.
Great. Well, I just want to thank you again for sharing your insight. I'm so glad that we were able to have you as part of our series. And we hope to have you back again, because you just have so much great insight. And I'm glad that we're also able to provide this recording.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.
All right.